Welcome to Craft with Kathie. I have a fun little project tonight, perfectly suited for a coffee bar. If you don't have a coffee bar, consider creating one. You don't need anything special. You could even just allocate an area on your countertop for it. Put your coffee maker there, your K-cups or your grounds or your whole beans or whatever you use to make your coffee, your cups, and then all the little accoutrements. Maybe your cream and sugar containers, cinnamon if you use cinnamon, whatever you add to your coffee, but put everything together so you have a dedicated area to make your morning friction-free. How nice it is to get up in the morning and smell the smell of coffee, freshly made, ready to go. Just grab your cup, sit down there and relax. Isn't that true? Now, obviously, if you're a tea drinker and not a coffee drinker, you could probably do something like this with a little bit of a modification. Anyway, I have this transfer, think of it as a stencil on steroids, that says, I like my coffee. And then it has an image of a coffee cup with the word hot, and then the wording underneath is just like I like my, and then you have the option of putting men, partner, salsa, husband, or wife. How cool is that? And I'm going to be doing it on this surface that I had probably ordered during the midst of the pandemic, and it came with a scratch on it, so I never used it, and it really wasn't worth sending it back. So I looked at it today and said, what could I do with this? And I thought, this stencil is perfect for it. So all I did was rough it up a little bit, used an emery or acrylic nail file instead of a sanding block, and just scraped up the edges a little bit more to make it a little bit more distressed looking. So because this is a found surface and I think it's painted, I put some wax on it, rubbed it in, buffed it off, and the wax is to use as a barrier whenever you're chalking on wood. And I like using our little surface wax because it comes in a small container and I don't end up wasting it. And it is unscented, which is right up my alley because sometimes scents bother me and give me a headache. So just basically putting the wax on and then buffing it off. So I mentioned that we wax wood surfaces for different reasons. One is to act as a barrier between our chalk paste and the surface so that the pigment of the paste isn't absorbed so easily into the wood. The second is to smooth out the wood because even sanded wood has little dips in it, so you want as smooth of a surface as possible. And the third reason is our stencils or our transfers. Think of our transfers as stencils on steroids. Are adhesive backed, and I don't want to accidentally lift any splinters of wood or paint up onto the back of the transfer. Our transfers are reusable 8 to 12 times or more with proper care, and that's one of the things you want to just be careful with. They're easy to clean. Our chalk paste is water soluble, so it's just running under water. You can use one of our little board erasers to help get off most of the paste, and you could even just use your fingers. I like finishing up with a disinfecting wipe, though, to make sure that I get everything out of the silkscreen, because our transfers are made of vinyl and silkscreen, and the silkscreen gives us this beautiful high definition of images and fonts and the wording. It just makes things so much simple, and we don't need a special cutting machine to do it, and there's no weeding. How cool is that? So you get right to the fun part, right? Drop me a comment and let me know how you prepare your coffee. Do you have a percolator that you heat up on the stove? An electric drip coffee maker? Remember, they were really popular, I think, in the 70s. A Keurig machine or another brand automated coffee maker? Or do you use a French press? What do you use to make your coffee? What is your favorite way of making your coffee? Or do you go with instant coffee? Just let me know. I'm just kind of curious. When I was a kid, pretty young, my mom taught me how to cook at a pretty young age. I know there was the option of those little those little ovens, easy bake ovens or whatever. And I wanted one. And my mom said, that's ridiculous. Why buy a little fake oven for a child? You might as well learn how to cook with a real stove and oven. So that's what she did. But one of the first things she taught me how to make was coffee, in one of those little metal percolators that you put the grounds in top. You fill it with water, put the grounds in the little basket, put the lid on, and put it on the stove to perk. So it was my job whenever we had company or whenever someone was coming over to visit to hurry up and make sure that the coffee was ready by the time they came in the door. And I remember one of my aunts commenting on it when I was around 10 years old. And she says, you have that coffee ready before we even pull in the driveway and open the door to get out of our cars. And she was so impressed by it. But yes, that was definitely one of my jobs, and I loved doing it. Now, I know yesterday was National Chocolate Chip Day. Don't get me started on my baking. I was pretty much a maniac, but that's a story for another day. We had a Chambers oven in the basement and a built-in oven in the kitchen upstairs, so I would try and be as efficient as possible and use both. Anyway, so I've applied the wax to this surface, and now I just need to fuzz my transfer before I use it. And fuzzing is actually using one of our fuzzing cloths. If you don't have a fuzzing cloth, you could use a towel or a sweater or a pair of jeans. But basically, you fuzz to diminish the stickiness of the transfer. Remember I said they're adhesive backed? Well, that's great. But on some surfaces, we don't want it to stick too strongly. Now, generally on wood, you don't have to fuzz too much. But if I was putting this on glass or metal or mirror, I would fuzz quite a bit because I want to make it not as sticky. Because on a very smooth surface, it sticks very strongly, and I don't want an issue when I try and lift it up. Because remember, our transfers are reusable. So taking good care of them means don't stretch them and distort that silkscreen. I'm making it sound more difficult than it is. Just fuzz it enough. Know that you fuzz quite a bit if you're putting it on something very, very smooth. But I'm only going to fuzz this a couple times, and I've already waxed my surface. So I'm about ready to get to the fun part and add my chalk paste to this. Now, it is chalk paste, not chalk paint. Totally different animal. Our chalk paste was specially formulated to work with our silkscreen stencils. It goes on liquid, but it dries to a hard finish. That is erasable from many surfaces. Glass, metal, mirror, spritz it with chalkboard, dry erase, spritz it with a little bit of water and use a paper towel or a board eraser or a board scraper, and you could remove the image and use that surface again and again and again. How is that for convenience and money-saving application, right? And the same transfer can be used on fabric. So you could put this on a t-shirt if you want. I kind of like it's not quite snarky, but it's a little bit flip, and that kind of fits with what I kind of like on my t-shirts. Might as well interject a little bit of humor where you can, right? I'm just repositioning this a bit. I'm going to eyeball it, but I want to make sure that it's lined up. So I'm looking at the space at the top between the transfer and the frame, and at the bottom, and then making sure that the white space on either side is pretty proportional. I'm smoothing it down. I want to make sure that there are no air bubbles underneath the silk screen, because an air bubble would impact how the paste goes through. And I'm going to use Dune paste and bark. I think Dune and bark on this. And the bark is the darker brown. And then I'm going to take a squeegee, dip it into my chalk paste, and apply it to the transfer. And just smooth it over the silkscreen areas that I want to color with the squeegee. Not a lot of pressure, just basically smooth it over, remove any lines, remove any excess paste, and go on to the next portion. Now, if you're doing something that takes a long time and you're doing a lot of different colors on it, you might want to use our paste and peel technique. And all that is applying the paste to one area, lifting up the transfer for a moment, setting it back down, and going on to the next section. You want to make sure that the paste does not dry within the silkscreen. And be careful, I almost went off the transfer. Of course, that would be easy enough to clean on this surface. While the paste is wet, you could wipe the any issues or excess paste off as long as it hasn't absorbed into the wood. So I'm going to do my wording with I like my coffee just like my in the bark. And then I might actually go with a little bit something different for those little flames for the hot on the side. What do you think I should put on the bottom? I guess it really depends on somebody's preference here, right? So I'm going to do the center area with the camel paste because it's a little bit lighter and kind of almost looks like Boston coffee. I like my coffee with cream, so I might as well make it the way I like it. Again, just smoothing it over the silk screen, removing any lines, getting the image fully covered. I generally like pulling the squeegee towards me as I work on a project. So with that in mind, I'm just rotating my surface so that I could easily do that. If you like to do it a slightly different way, that's fine. There's really no right or wrong in that. You just want to make get sure you get good coverage over the silkscreen, just a light layer actually, and have a light touch. You don't have to scrape or anything. You're just smoothing it over, removing any lines, and then removing the excess chalk paste. And then when you have all the excess chalk paste on your squeegee, put it back in the jar. There's no sense wasting it. Our paste does come in 3-ounce jars, but it also comes in individual packet sizes that are great for smaller projects. Of course, I usually get 2 or 3 projects out of an individual paste packet anyway. Now, I did mention that you can use our transfers on fabric, canvas, t-shirts, cotton, quilt pieces. I've even used them on kind of like a fake velvet pillowcase, and it works fine. But when you use fabric or anything that's going to be washable, instead of using our chalk paste, you want to use our ink, because the ink will need to be heat set, which is easy to do with an iron or a heat press, and then it makes it permanent. So I'm still sticking with the paste because I'm on a surface here, a wooden surface, and I've switched to our saucy color of chalk paste. It was a color of the month a few months back. Now I need to decide what I'm going to put at the bottom. I like my coffee hot, just like my men, my partner, my salsa, my husband, or my wife. Well, I think I'm going to go with the salsa. Makes it a little bit more generic, and it'll work for anyone who likes salsa. Here's the peel and reveal. Look at the amazing clarity. The lettering is beautiful, but look at the foam on the top of the cup with the word hot. You just can't get anything like that with a Cricut machine. So the silkscreen on our transfers or our stencils are beautiful. It just works beautifully for creating something this detailed. I'm going to set that aside to dry for a moment and get the next transfer off of my little backer sheet. And I'm going with the word salsa. Like I said, I think it's a little bit generic, and this would be suited for anyone who likes salsa, of course, right? So I'm going to, just like before, I'm going to apply it to my surface. I'm going to be careful not to bump what I've previously chalked with my fingers because it is still wet. Like I said, it goes on wet but dries to a hard surface. I could dry this with our drying tool. If you don't have a drying tool, you could use a hair dryer. Just set it on a cool setting. You want something with focused air. Otherwise, the paste will dry in about 5 to 8 minutes. And I'm just being careful here. I don't see any reason to have to use the drying tool as long as I'm careful and I don't bump what I've already chalked with my fingers. Got a little piece of fuzz there in the way. And I realize I'm going to have to watch my sleeves a little bit. I almost got my right sleeve into a jar of paste earlier. Okay, I've got the word salsa chalked. Peel and reveal. I like my coffee hot, just like my salsa. Isn't this sweet? So easy, so quick, and a lot of fun. Just the right piece of decor to add to the coffee bar. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like any more information, comment coffee and I'll get back to you. See you soon.